Chapter 5, Amor Fati, Love and Accept Your Fate. Quote, "Nothing happens to anybody which he is not fitted by nature to bear." Marcus Aurelius. It is fitting to write this chapter at the end of a day when the concept of Amor Fati was almost lost on me. One of the best things that has come out of this entire ordeal was my introduction to the philosophy of Stoicism. A younger brother sent me some information about this ancient philosophy years before, but I hadn't given it much thought. In 2016, when I could finally read again, I skimmed a few books he recommended. With my foggy vision, it was often hard to read without a giant spotlight hitting my book in just the right way, but the concept of Amor Fati always has stayed with me. In my darkest moments, I found a gem in the writings and videos of Ryan Holiday. Do yourself a favor and look this guy up. Read his books, subscribe to his free daily emails, and listen to his talks on YouTube. He is a young guy whose gift to take an ancient philosophy and apply it so aptly and clearly to our current lives and challenges is amazing. What I came to learn and understand was that the principles of Stoicism were as relevant and applicable to the challenges of living in contemporary times as they were when Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and others wrote about them almost 2,000 years ago, at the beginning of the Common Era. When I run into the same messages in many different bottles, or when I encounter something hundreds or thousands of years old that resonates, I see that I am stumbling upon a truth. Ryan Holiday, having learned the Nietzsche-coined concept of Amor Fati from author Robert Greene, felt that it captured a cornerstone and the essence of Stoic philosophy. Love your fate. I don't really think of it as truly loving my fate. Who can love losing a child, a loved one, or having an illness? I think of the concept of Amor Fati as a form of radical acceptance. Accept your fate and adopt the mindset to accept and make the best of your circumstances. Most of the time, we're not in control of what happens to us, but we are in control of our attitude and action toward those circumstances. In fact, the very famous Serenity Prayer captures perfectly what I believe when I think of Amor Fati. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Health, balance, and resilience reside in these perfect words. Let me accept the things I cannot change. I cannot change the fact that I took an antibiotic back in 2016. I cannot change the fact that the antibiotic injured my central nervous system. I cannot change the fact that I went on Xanax and gabapentin to calm those symptoms, nor can I change the fact that I had a surgery that sent me back on those meds 3 years later. I cannot change the fact that I now have to endure a complicated withdrawal from these medications. For me, this is a tough one. The what-ifs and the if-onlys can really take me under if I lose track and let myself start going down the rabbit hole. It's hard to accept when bad things happen to us. Another amazing book that helped me as I grappled with not becoming an injustice collector and getting stuck on why me was the book by Buddhist writer Pema Chodron called When Things Fall Apart. Pema speaks about having a sign pinned to her wall that read, quote, "Only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over again to annihilation can that which is indestructible be found in us." Let me read that to you again. Only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over again to annihilation can that which is indestructible be found in us. She says that for her, it was all about letting go of everything. Annihilation sounds like a dramatic and scary word. However, for those of you who've gone through being floxed, or a benzo withdrawal, or an antidepressant withdrawal, or a med injury, you probably know that our experiences can often bring us to the brink of annihilation. I have a dear friend who's helped thousands of people in their benzo withdrawal experience, and she states on one of her podcasts, if someone who has gone through benzo withdrawal tells me they haven't thought about suicide, I think they're lying. End quote. For me, and for many others, it isn't that we want to die, or that we make a plan and we're actively suicidal. It's simply the fact that there are times when you truly feel you cannot and will not survive this, that you cannot endure one more moment. I believe that is what Pema was speaking about as she spoke about the brink of annihilation. And I believe that if we can get to that brink over and over again and not go over the other side, we eventually will find what is truly indestructible about us and our spirit to survive. Give me the courage to change the things I can. Little things I could change became important. My diet, I could control cutting out artificial sweeteners and sugar of any kind. I could abstain from alcohol and give up caffeine. These were a few things I could do that made a big difference. However, the most important way this showed up in my recovery process was the realization that the one thing that can never be taken from us is our attitude. So what can I change? I can find the courage to change my attitude. One way I did this was by thinking about all of the other people in the world right now suffering from physical, mental, and spiritual ailments. I would send prayers out to people I knew and many I didn't. Once in a while, I'd get on GoFundMe and make small donations to people I didn't know who were enduring something incredibly painful. I worked to be grateful and worked hard to recognize and remember that my attitude was the one thing that could not be taken from me. I began to slow down and think about how I was speaking to myself. I worked to go from, oh no, what if I don't get better, to, oh, I know I'm going to get better. I leaned on Wayne Dyer's play on words, and instead of focusing on believing it when I see it, I started to focus on knowing that I will see it when I believe it. Do not get me wrong. I was and am far from successfully mastering this practice. My attitude has made things much, much worse on many, many days, as I would slip into a state of fear, exhaustion, or feeling sorry for myself. And the wisdom to know the difference. This is so key. Practicing the art of slowing down and figuring out what is and what is not in my control. This is a key principle in Stoicism, the wisdom to know the difference between what is and is not in one's control. On my most painful days, I found that my ability to slow down and gain this perspective would collapse. In the pain, the walls came in and my view became myopic, urgent, and fear-based. I needed to take what the Stoics refer to as a view from the cosmos, to stand high above and see my situation from a bird's eye view, a moment in time, one moment in time to endure, and then the next. Going back to my previous point about second fear, you can see how my challenge to radically accept my fate only perpetuated a trauma response of fear, adrenaline, fear, adrenaline, fear. Dr. Weeks and Stoic philosophers, as well as so many traditions in psychotherapy, such as CBT, DBT, and ACT, stress the importance of right-sizing our thoughts and using radical acceptance as a primary mode to regulate our emotions and tame our autonomic and automatic trauma reactions. For me, this is where I really turned to Claire Weeks, the folks in the TWR program, discussed later in the book, and also the work of Sally Winston and Martin Seif to guide me. Just like the title of this chapter, Amor, Fati, I believe a shift in attitude can greatly improve our recovery. Those of us with medication injuries, and especially those of us in benzodiazepine withdrawal, are experiencing a multitude of highly distressing physical and mental symptoms that are unwanted. What Weeks, the TWR program, and Winston and Seif discuss is that what needs to shift is our relationship with our distressing thoughts, fears, and physical sensations. Recovery isn't when you no longer have symptoms. It's when the symptoms no longer have you. Let me repeat that. Recovery is not when you no longer have symptoms. It is when the symptoms no longer have you. However, secondary trauma is a major disadvantage for many of us. What we are experiencing has been simply written off as not possible or not true. We can often be seen as feigning, malingering, or simply having a return of symptoms from a disorder maybe we hadn't addressed previously. What Dr. Sally Winston spoke about in an interview, and Claire Weeks spoke about decades ago, is that we need good information to then be able to implement the attitude of letting things be. For example, once Claire learned that it was her fear over her heart palpitations that kept them in place, she was able to practice floating and letting time pass. She took the magnifying glass off her heart, her pounding heart, wondering, oh no, what does this mean? Oh no, is this going to kill me? For most of us, we don't have doctors that are saying, okay, you have an iatrogenic injury from this medication that's led to an extremely raw and sensitized nervous system that has the potential to affect bodily functions, sensory functions, mental processing, your stress response cycle, and interplays with all of your other neurotransmitters, hormones, and chemical exchanges. If we didn't hear those words, then it would be more likely that when our heart missed our beats or palpated, when we began to have racing thoughts, when we felt stuck in fight or flight, when we obsessed and then began to ruminate, when our skin burned, adrenaline surged, our ears whooshed, or our blood pressure plummeted, we wouldn't run screaming for the hills with, oh my God, oh no, or what if? If we had heard those words, we would be far less likely to be running for the hills and screaming, oh my God, oh no, or what if? So for me to begin recovery, I had to do some research and come up with my confirmation of this is what it is, Jen. You have an iatrogenic injury to your central nervous system, and it is highly sensitized and raw. This has then allowed me to begin to adopt an attitude of allowance for these highly distressing symptoms. When I rush to Dr. Google or to the sites for the millionth time to type in a symptom, I try to gently remind myself that this is a form of checking and reassurance seeking that will give me short-term relief, but ultimately will most likely lead me further down the rabbit hole. Dr. Winston, in a recent DARE call, gave 2 great examples that I think are critical for us working to change our attitude and response to our situations. I will change them a bit to fit our unique circumstances. The first one. Imagine you wake up in the morning and there's a new room in your house that magically appeared overnight. In that room is a giant mounted TV that is tuned into the withdrawal station, where 24/7 there are scary thoughts, benzo lies of never getting better, weird bodily sensations, and loads of unwanted thoughts and feelings. There is no remote for this TV, and you cannot figure out how to turn it off. It simply runs all day, every day. You can stay in that room staring at it and become overwhelmed. You can leave the room, but go back in every few minutes to see if it's still there, which it will be. Or you can leave the room, knowing it's still running, and allow it to be there while you go wash the dishes, go for a walk, read something interesting, or play with the dog. I don't know about you guys, but things get so overwhelming for me that I can spend all day, every day throwing things at that TV, trying to get it off the withdrawal station, and all I end up feeling is more frustrated and hopeless. The second example was one Dr. Winston took from acceptance and commitment therapy. Imagine you are throwing a very fancy, high-end party. You've spent tens of thousands of dollars on the event, including having fresh crab flown in from Alaska. In the middle of the party, you notice a man in bedraggled clothes, sort of smelly and grungy, standing at the buffet table, eating some of your very expensive crab. You're getting more and more upset at his presence. He's ruining your party. All of your attention is now focused on this smelly intruder. Other people seem to notice him, but they're busy drinking, dancing, and socializing. But you are now completely obsessed with his presence and what to do about him. You've walked over and quietly asked him to leave, but he doesn't seem to hear you. Now, you can either begin to yell and get irate, call the police to have him forcibly removed, or you can choose to let him be, get engaged with the rest of your event and friends, and enjoy your party. I know what I would do, and I know what I've done 1,000 times. I've begged my smelly intruder to leave. I've tried to pray him away. I've spent months focused on his presence and become so internally focused that the rest of my world and life have become nearly extinct. However, I believe if we can practice Amor Fati and shift our attitude from fight to float, it will not magically remove our withdrawal experience, our symptoms, or the smelly intruder, but in time they will leave. In the meantime, what's most important is we have an added second fear to fear. We haven't become so internally preoccupied that we're making things worse, and we haven't been practicing being terrified of the state we're in. We've allowed our situation and all of its accordant unwanted symptoms to simply be. During my recovery from these medications over the last 6 years, I have focused as best I can on this practice. Believe me, I'm not great at it, and sometimes the chemical onslaught we face just makes a shift in attitude feel like a pipe dream. But we do get good at what we practice. While Ryan Holiday is not a doctor or a therapist, his books, The Obstacle is the Way and Stillness is the Key, and his daily Stoic meditations speak to this allowing, accepting, and smarter effort mentality. These books became and continue to be important guides that provide a salve and remedy when hopelessness and despair descend. Another of my favorite quotes is by Socrates. Quote, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not into fighting the old, but building the new." Let me repeat that. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not into fighting the old, but building the new. Accepting the trauma, the interruption in the fabric of my old life, and learning to keep my eyes focused on the present has and is key. My darkest days are always intensified by looking back at what I used to be able to accomplish. I could work 10 hours a day, run to see a friend, grab a niece or nephew for a slumber party, and not break a sweat. Now any one of those things is difficult to achieve on a good day. The only way out is through, and we cannot look backward. How we build the new is by doing our very best every minute of every day. And sometimes doing our best simply means maintaining an attitude that we will see this painful moment day, week, month, or year through, and we will undoubtedly be changed in the process. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, quote, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." This quote is bedrock for me in my healing process. There have been many times when I spent hours holding tight to the why of my experience. I mentioned at the beginning, 2 words, Aunt Jen. Those 2 words are my why. Those words have given me more purpose, identity, pure love, and motivation than any other thing in my life. I became an aunt to Megan at the age of 30 years old. The best of me was born that year. This fall of 2021, I just welcomed my 10th niece or nephew. Aunt Jen is consistent, fun, available, interested, loving, goofy, hypervigilant about safety, and dedicated. These 10 people offer me a platform to perform at my highest, most authentic level. This injury and process seek to rob me of these traits daily. Sometimes the injury does win. But I know that lurking underneath all of this is a new and improved Aunt Jen, and it is this thought that keeps my head above water during the harder moments. Find your why. Viktor Frankl. Period. This man and his work are life-changing. For those unfamiliar, please get a copy of Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl spent years in a concentration camp while the rest of his family perished. Once released, he developed a psychospiritual therapy called logotherapy that focuses on finding meaning in suffering. He wrote about attitudinal values as being something that no one and nothing could strip away from us. They could take away his clothes, his food, and his loved ones, but they could not get inside him and take away his choice in how he would respond to himself. One of my all-time favorite Frankl quotes is this: "Between stimulus and response lies a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose a response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." This is a quote I fell in love with early in my career, and I've probably shared it hundreds of times with clients, as I feel it's so powerful. On days when the mental or physical pain feels unbearable, I search for this space, the space between the stimulus, the pain, and my response. Many days I collapse that space, and my response is more of a reaction of self-pity, doubt that I can survive this, fear that I might not ever get better, only to get worse again, or to get better only to get worse again. But as I practice, and it does take lots of practice, I'm able to see that I can still choose. That space does exist. One of the things that I've said to myself on bad days, like today as I'm writing this, is this, quote, "Jen, even right now, as bad as you feel, there are tens of millions of people that would change places with you. This is bad, you feel awful, but there is still so much to be grateful for." For those of you reading and thinking there could be no fresher hell than the one you're in, I know it feels that way. I always told my clients, what is the worst kind of pain? It's the pain you feel. We cannot know another's hell, no matter how empathic we are. So how does one practice Amor Fati and come to fully accept their fate when that fate is one of terrible pain? Practice. And for me, revisiting my faith.